Hi, this is Paladin, and this channel is dedicated to examining issues from a skeptical perspective. For this first video, we'll be looking at gun culture in America, and the issue that we'll be examining is to be made by Patrick Andal, a professor of mathematics, that wrote Stupid Party, Math versus Myth, Unmasking the Destructive Forces Eroding American Democracy. This was on Midpoint, a political talk show, published on May 12th, 2015. The link is in the description. Here we go.
The statues are silent, but they tell a story of innocent lives lost. Terrell Bosley, Blair Holt, and Idea Pendleton among them. Dressed in the clothing of each of the victims, but faceless, the statues represent how quickly someone can be ripped from their life by gun violence.
Well, first off, someone. It depends on who the person is. Me, if you haven't guessed already, I'm Asian, living in the United States, middle class. The chances of me being ripped away from my life due to gun violence is relatively minor, so not a big deal for me. If I was a African American youth, age 16 to around 27, I would be more concerned. Continuing on.
It's just real hurtful to know that you do all the right things to raise your child, and then somebody, another teenager or somebody with a mental illness gets their hands on a gun and changes your life forever.
Let's not mince words nor bullets, all right? Gun violence in the United States has become an epidemic. It is projected that sometime in 2015, gun deaths will become more prevalent in the United States than auto fatalities.
Gun deaths will become more prevalent than auto fatalities. Well, I don't know if that's because cars are getting safer, that because the paramedics and doctors are more able to treat auto accidents, auto casualties. I mean, as a point of information, that's relatively meaningless. And let's not forget that 2/3 of gun violence victims are all suicides. And when you truly look into it, when a person does truly want to kill themselves, other than this BS amateur attempt of crying for help with the horizontal slits on the wrist, when a person truly does want to kill themselves, they usually succeed. Let's look at Japan or the Scandinavian countries. Fairly strict gun ownership compared to the United States, fairly high suicide rate. All in all, if a person truly wanted to kill themselves, I'm guessing a fairly strict gun control law in the United States, akin to that of Australia, would probably save maybe a thousand people, 1,200 people a year. Not worth the 100,000 defensive gun uses. And that link will be posted at the bottom of this video.
Our guest is a mathematician who loves stats.
A mathematician who loves stats. Not a criminologist, a mathematician. Heck, you know what? Perhaps I should go ask the food scientist on aircraft design.
He's on a quest seeking sanity in the crazy world of politics, and his most recent work is focused on gun ownership and violence. He is the author of Stupid Party, Math versus Myth, Unmasking the Destructive Forces Eroding American Democracy. Patrick Andal is in the Midpoint House. Patrick, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure. What is it that made you specifically want to look at the gun deaths issue and start to put some numbers down?
It's secretly because he's a gun grabber.
Here.
Well, I guess I'd already done some background research into Ferguson to try and understand what was happening.
Which tangentially relates to gun ownership and gun violence. I mean, the decedent, Mr. Brown, did charge the officer, and the officer was, well, let's just say the officer had to do what he had to do. And this is according to a DOJ report commissioned by the great and black Eric Holder. Let's continue on.
So I had that already in tune. Then when Baltimore happened, I decided to start looking at the numbers.
Baltimore. Does he mean Freddie Gray, whose spine was severed? Unless, of course, I was mistaken and Mr. Gray was shot in the back of the head, or shot in the back, or shot kneeling down with his hands up and saying, "Don't shoot," like that great narrative that was propagated by, well, let's just say, community organizers.
And what was odd was that there are no proper tracking of police homicides. In this country, the FBI try, but they...
Wait a moment. Police homicide? So if but I thought we're talking about gun violence. I mean, a police homicide could be someone cracking the guy's head open with a baton, like with what happened with Kelly Thomas. So gun violence to homicide. I still don't see I really don't see a clear connection there, Professor.
All police precincts report. So it clearly hasn't been an important enough issue until now to figure out what is going on.
Now, there's a couple of things in here that I caught in your study, and you point out that violent crimes have halved over the last 20 years. But we are told here in America by a number of people that this reduction is because of the presence of more guns. Yet you found out that that is, in your words, a myth, correct?
Yes, that is a myth. There are plenty of reasons why violent crimes come down 20 years.
Yes, there are plenty of reasons why violent crime decreases. I don't subscribe to, well, I don't subscribe to strong. I do not subscribe strongly to the idea that more guns reduce violent crime. What I do support is that greater economic wealth does lower violent crime. When one looks at the number of guns owned in, let's say, Vermont or Utah, and the comparative gun violence in those states, it's there's a great discrepancy. Utah and Vermont, high gun ownership, very low death rate. In fact, if we would take a micro look at this issue, we would see that where gun ownership is the highest, again, legal gun ownership is the highest, as in the suburbs and the rural areas, we'll see low gun ownership. We'll see low gun homicide or low crime. But if we apply it to where guns are more heavily restricted, we will see that those areas have higher crime rates. So let's not do the inverse and link more guns to more violent crime.
Over the last 20 years, especially in New York, deaths are down gun deaths are down by like 85%, I think.
Yes, New York gun deaths are down. Thanks in part to stop and frisk, and of course, pricing all the poor people out of the areas. So, well, now it's safe.
Nobody would argue that has anything to do with guns. Guns may have gone up, the number of guns that people own, but the amount of households that have guns has not gone up over this period of time. So to suggest that more guns has any impact on reducing crime is not correct. Plus, I would demonstrate that states that have more guns tend to have worse gun homicide statistics.
Now, we're looking at some stats right now on the screen. Look at
Mutus mutandis, Vermont, Utah, and suburbs and rural areas.
Gun ownership around the world, and it shows 270 million civilian guns in the United States. The next closest country is Germany at 25 million. And the percentage of homicides, 67.5% to 26%.
I would just like to note that if you were to take the 270 million guns owned in the United States and you were to divide them up by the number of homicides, it would show us some pretty interesting statistics, because then it may show within certain countries that, you know what, most of our guns in America, they're lazier than the guns in those Australian countries or those gun regulated countries.
Now, when you look at these numbers, do you come to the realization here that it's because we have more guns, we have bad laws, we're a more violent society? I mean, what is it? There has to be a reason in there.
I don't think America's a more violent society.
And here we're going to see that the professor of mathematics is not a professor of history. Looking back to the 1910s and 1920s, before the United Kingdom had their gun control laws, their draconian gun control laws, we see that the murder rate in the UK was lower than the murder rate in the United States. Even after they implemented the UK implemented their gun control laws, their murder rate was still low. It basically was on a trend downwards. Personally, I believe that America is somewhat more violent. Maybe it's due to independent nature or whatever other factors. But if you want to disagree with me, feel free in the comment box below.
When you look at violent crimes per se, it's not particularly notable, but it does have the highest incarceration rates.
Thanks to the drug war.
So, I've lost the train of your question.
No, but the question is with regard to whether we are in America a more violent society or simply we just have guns available and people decide to use them. I mean,
Okay.
that seems to be the biggest question that everybody always asks.
Yeah, I think America has a sort of infantile gun culture. I'm not.
Infantile gun culture. What makes this infantile? What, our respect for the Second Amendment? Or our decisiveness not to let the government control the one tool that would be necessary for a revolt against a tyrannical organization or person? Please, Professor, do continue.
I'm not suggesting what the changes should be, but
Because, well, the changes that he has are bullcrap. If he had any at all.
gun culture is represented by the NRA, and I think the NRA is.
No, gun culture is represented by gun-owning Americans.
It's an insidious organization, and
An insidious organization. Well, I'm not a gigantic fan of the NRA, but personally, I consider Mayors Against Illegal Guns, Moms Demand a Plan, or whatever their name is now, or even the Brady Campaign to be an insidious organization. In fact, those organizations want to take away my civil rights.
that until they reform themselves to be willing to reflect the views of their members, they
Please do continue. The views of their members.
really shouldn't be taken seriously, and politicians shouldn't be taking their money.
Well, that's an interesting point, Professor. I see now that more Americans support gun rights than gun control. So maybe those Democratic politicians should, stop taking the fucking money from the Brady campaign or Moms Demand a Plan or Mayors Against Illegal Guns. You know what? Because their views don't reflect average Americans. Continuing on.
Well, you mentioned the NRA and you mentioned the numbers. Here's what you quoted in here, which I found fascinating. 77% of NRA.
Just as an aside, I visited the website. Can't find any numbers.
Members favor a waiting period for handgun purchase. 82% of Americans support limiting the.
Did you see what happened right there? It moved from NRA members to Americans favoring a ban on
sale of military-style assault weapons.
The AR-15 is a semi-automatic rifle. Its round is banned for hunting in some areas, in fact in most areas, because it's too weak as a hunting round to successfully take out a deer. So when they say it's a military-style assault weapon, I would ask what that truly means. Does he mean like the Beretta 9mm pistol that's also a weapon that's also stylized for military use? So therefore, is my Beretta a military-style assault weapon? Is my Remington 870 a military-style assault weapon? Because, well, it's styled after the military, and it's a weapon that's used to assault people if the need arises.
94% of police chiefs
94% of police chiefs favor what?
requiring a background check for all.
Favor requiring a background check. You mean these are the same police chiefs that probably favor searches of cell phones during vehicle stops, during routine, ran at a red light, or you were drifting in lanes, vehicle stops. Don't believe me? Listen to the oral arguments in Riley versus California. The government goes out of its way to support. The police chiefs go out of their way to support reasonable restrictions on the Fourth Amendment. Just open up your cell phone, show what's on it. Well, we can go through your photos, cell phone records, cell phone history, emails, internet history, text messages. It's just a minor violation of the Fourth Amendment, and this is what the police chief supports. So, well, it must be correct.
Handgun sales. Where did you get these numbers? These are very revealing, and I guarantee you that as I spit them out, you're going to have NRA people saying, no, that can't be the case.
Well, those are the numbers. I mean, the links are provided on my piece. So if
On what piece? On your website, I can't find it. You shifty little piece of shit.
if you visit the piece, you can automatically just click on the link and you'll find where the source comes from. But it all comes from standard sources.
So how are they getting
Standard sources? What the hell does that mean? There's no MLA definition of what a standard source is. There's no APA definition of what a standard source is.
away with this then, Patrick? If the NRA indeed is fostering this image forward, what do you think is the reason why that the numbers point out, and your math is excellent, it shows that the numbers say that Americans want to change, but you call them
Yes, Americans do want to change. The Americans currently, as of May 2015, want the government to get its fucking paws off our goddamn guns.
insidious? I guess that would have to lead to why you think they're able to get away with it.
Yes, I think that the whole gun debate is controlled by fanatics.
Civil rights leaders, people that want to be able to resist tyranny if it does occur, people that want to protect themselves, people that want to hunt or shooting, those fanatics.
Fanatics who lead the NRA. The NRA membership believes that they are working within a democratic organization, but that is just not true. The NRA is governed by a 9-person nominating committee. They're the people who get to decide who are on the board of directors of the NRA. The NRA has absolutely no interest at all in representing the views of their members.
Which is why they took up the case of Heller versus DC. No interest at all in the gun-owning abilities of the persons of the District of Columbia.
Is the NRA, in your opinion, simply just pulling the wool over people's eyes and playing people for fools then?
Correct. They represent the view. They represent basically gun manufacturers.
Gun manufacturers whose profits are derived from the consumer buying the weapon. Consumers drive the demand for guns, and even if it was true, all that reflects is consumer demand for a product, which the NRA supports. So either the NRA is supported by paying members, or the NRA is supported by, and this is true, they're supported partly by gun manufacturers whose products are bought by gun owners who shape the future products that are released. So either way, the NRA represents the views of gun owners.
So then, in all of the math that you did here, did you find, I got about 40 seconds left, did you find a
math that has no statistical backing, by the way?
Bright spot here, something that would indicate that maybe there's a way out of this gun culture?
Possibly with the divisiveness of Obama being president, it might reduce racial tensions in the next election, and we can actually
reduce racial tensions in the next election. You mean like Ferguson, or what else was it? Baltimore, Florida with Trayvon Martin. Oh, please do continue again, Professor.
That might allow a more intelligent conversation. But everybody in America wants to talk about this issue, and there are fairly simple things that could be done.
And I got to point out that in the piece, a lot of what you point out here seem to be really simple things that can be done, which makes it fascinating enough to look at. I know we're going to be visiting again sometime on this, because this is something that I'm sure the NRA will hear this interview, and they will be very
Well, that's the first video of my channel. Listen, rate, and comment if you want. Thank you so much. Have a great night.